Well, we'll do this last little session, and it's something that most people probably avoid. So we're going to talk about it and not avoid it today. We all know this, but whenever you go to a family dinner or a family reunion, they say there's two topics you never talk about at a family reunion. Politics and religion. Yeah, that's what people do, right? Go to a family reunion, but we all have that one uncle or aunt, or for me, it's my sister, that will just bring up conversations and controversial topics just to make things interesting. That's what my sister says. She's like, I just want to make things interesting. So what do you think about it? It's like, oh, why did you ask that question? There's a lot of families that I know people in our church will say, well, you just don't talk about that with my family. Do not do that. Unfortunately, I think we have that approach when it comes to our topic that we're going to look at for the next few minutes. And that is the topic of sex, gender, and purity. We live in a culture that pushes it, but we often live in families that avoid it. And so what we're going to do is just kind of dive in and have a bunch of thoughts on this idea of uncomfortable talks and what the Bible has to say about these issues.
Okay, so number one is that when it comes to conversations about sex and purity and gender issues, you are the instructor with your family. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, don't stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So not only don't make them angry, but also instruct them in God's ways. And this has to do with body, soul, and spirit, every aspect of our life, especially when it comes to sexual things. We're the instructor. And it's tough. It's a rat race to try to beat the world on certain topics. And so it's really important for Christian parents to take that and to take up the challenge, because the world is already, from the get-go, the world is sending messages to our kids about sex, about sexuality, about gender. So we have to have those conversations before they get the misguided information from another source. Everything and everyone in the world is already going to be speaking to your kids, whether it's just through movies, through social media, about sex. The church cannot be silent and let the world dictate what our kids believe about sexuality. The church has to speak, but guess what? We're the church. We have to remember that. We can't just go, oh, my church is going to teach, and you hit that already in our last session, but it's not the church is going to teach my kids how to have a healthy mentality about sex. I'm the church. In this aspect, I am the instructor God gave to my children about sexuality. We don't want the media taking on that role, because there's so much misguided information out there. The enemy's strategy is to misinform our families, to inflate premature things, to pervert what God has intended to be a blessing in their lives. So, we need to avoid a shameful mentality when it comes to sexuality. I think many times the church, maybe in days gone by, had focused so much on a shaming side of it that it just the topic got missed or skipped over altogether. So just remembering that you are the instructor. A few statistics, some of these are older statistics, so they may be a little different now, but in years gone by age 15, 13% of teens had already had sex. By age 19, 70% of teens in America had had sex already. That means that the teens that our kids are growing up around have already had these experiences. It's important for us to know that and to not pretend like it doesn't exist, because it does exist. And many kids even have grown up in abusive situations where they've had those experiences not by their own choice, but by the wrong choices of another person. So we need to know, and it can be terrifying as a parent that my kids are going to be growing up around other kids who've been exposed to all these things, but don't be afraid. Just take on that role. I'm their instructor. We're gonna have all these difficult conversations. It's really important. We have at our house, call it awkward talks with mom. We're sitting at the kitchen table and I'm like, all right, it's time for awkward talks with mom. And my kids go, no. But they know that when I say that, it's gonna be about sexuality in some way. And many times it's because I've observed something maybe in one of their friends, or maybe I've heard something come up in a conversation, and we need to be the first ones to talk about it, even around the kitchen table. It's okay. And your kids need to know it's okay, and you need to bring it up. If they know it's okay to bring it up, then guess what? When they hear something away from you or something that confuses them, they're going to bring it up to you if they know this is okay to bring up in our household.
Yeah, so we have to remember that we're the instructor. And so the second thought then is that sometimes we avoid it, and we just avoid the topic. And most parents don't speak to their kids about the topics of gender or about sex or about purity. Probably going back to the barriers lesson, because we feel like we don't know. But and I'm not trying to be crude or anything, but if you have kids, then you know something. And so we have to be able to understand, like, we may not have the exact answer on gender, purity, or sex, but we do know more than they do. And so we have to be able to speak into the subject, but a lot of times we avoid it. So why do we avoid it? I have a handful of answers. You have just lines. You can write down whatever you want, but here's some reasons that we avoid the topic of gender, sex, purity. Number one is what I call selective silence. Unfortunately, some homes where there's a mom and a dad, a lot of times even the spouses don't talk about these things. They don't talk about sex or sexual desires or purity or gender because their family didn't talk about it. And so it's just kind of a silent subject. What is it? It's selective silence. It's silence that is just it's a bad practice. Because like Hannah just said, the kids grow up not comfortable talking about it. And so then they go and they start a marriage, not comfortable talking about it, and the cycle continues. Number two is it becomes a family culture thing. We don't talk about it because our family, we just don't talk about it. My parents didn't talk about it. It's awkward territory. It's just the culture I'm saying. That stops us from doing it. Number three, and I think this is big, especially in people who have grown up in church, is misguided, quote unquote, Christian values. A lot of Christians are taught for years that sex, gender, and purity is a shameful thing. We don't talk about it. We avoid the subject. That's only to be between a man and a woman. But then when a man and a woman get married, they go into it blind because no one ever talked about it. Parents didn't talk about it. No one invested that into them. So the next is false assumptions. One of the reasons we avoid it is we think, well, they already know. When it comes to our kids, well, they already know. They just know it. I mean, they're 19, they're 18, they're 15, they already know by now. It's just a false assumption. The next is fear. We get fearful about talking to them. We don't know what to say, how to say it, or when to say it. And so the whole concept of the conversation just brings anxiety and fear and stress. Another is ignorance. Another is past guilt. Another reason we avoid it is, and I think this is a big one, is indifference. When you talk about fear and ignorance and past guilt, those three kind of go together. Past guilt, well, I didn't do things right, so how can I instruct it in this? I sowed my wild oats, so they're gonna have their time of sowing their wild oats. That's a bad approach. And I'm not picking on anybody, but I think there's a lot of people. I remember there's one guy in our church talking about his kids. They were like just early 20s. He was like, well, it's their years of sowing their oats. I did mine, I'll sow theirs, and they'll come back eventually. And I'm like, no, stop it. And that's that indifferent attitude. And unfortunately, many of us, we approach the subject by just avoiding it. And so what do we have to do instead? Well, here's what you need to understand, and I need to understand. While the talk of gender, sex, and purity, we call it uncomfortable talks with mom. I threw dad in there a couple of times, and no, dad, you can't say it. Only mom can say uncomfortable talks with mom. It may be uncomfortable, but we have to know this. You're going to end up talking about it at some point. You're either going to talk about it in a preemptive way and premeditated way and proactive way, or you're going to end up talking about it in a hurt and have to heal way. At some point, it's going to come up. And so why not have the approach of, we're going to talk about this now. We're going to talk about this these years and invest it this time. And so what we need to realize is that talking biblically to our kids about sex, gender, and purity, it is our responsibility, and it's an area not to be avoided. Number 3 on the handout, and I want us to see this, is the fact that great parents desire to protect purity. Great parents have a desire to protect purity. What is the main thing that protects purity? Well, it's investing truth. Jesus said, "You will know the truth will set you free." Kids in every stage, they need truth in this area. We'll talk about, in just a minute, we'll talk about when to approach certain subjects at maybe what ages. But what we need to realize is the world is always going to be screaming lies into the mind of everybody. I mean, the old adage regarding advertising, and if you grew up in the early 90s or heard about this, you remember it. Sex sells. That was the adage that really came out in the 90s and late 80s and early 90s. Why did they do that? Well, they started putting it on every billboard, every ad, all of this stuff, because they understood everybody's interested in this. And so it would bring out these ideas and questions and all of that type of stuff. Well, what do we need to do as Christian believers, as followers of Jesus? We want to input purity and truth into them now, because then when a lie comes out, they'll believe it. It's like everybody in here, if we were to bring, of course, most of you have, a few of you have smaller kids. If we were to bring B up, well, B might not be an example. Evie would bring her up. And if I were to give her, a Monopoly $5 bill, or to give her a $5, and tell her, that's a $5 bill, she'd believe me. She'd be like, oh, okay. Now, Brian probably wouldn't. Like, maybe B, he probably already knows. He might, but man, that little age, they're going to believe you, right? They just go, oh, that's a $5 bill. But if I brought, I saw your kids up here. How old? What's the oldest?
Spencer's 10.
Spencer's 10. If I brought Spencer up here and I gave him a Monopoly $5 bill and I said, Spencer, this is a $5 bill, he would look at me and be like, you're crazy, man. That's not a $5 bill. That's a Monopoly $5 bill. Why? Because he knows the truth. Now, at some point, you taught Spencer, this is real, this is fake. Why don't we address that when it comes to other topics like sex, purity, and gender? The reason we don't do it is because sometimes we aren't intentional about investing the truth now. And so when you think about investing purity and the truth now, we have to know that biblical truth in the heart of a child will help them discern lies just like it would in any other area. Because to all mankind, things of sexuality, gender, and purity, and all of this gender issues, all of that type of stuff, a lot of times it all looks good, it all looks consumable, it all looks enjoyable, but under the spotlight of truth, deception is easy to spot. And so I want to invest purity into my kids starting at a very young age. And so you think about scripture, 2 Timothy 2:22. Paul said, flee youthful lusts, but follow righteousness. 1 Peter 2:11. Peter wrote, I beseech you, the pilgrims and strangers, abstain from fleshly lusts, which war against your soul. Then we know that the war is going to be there. So a great parent is going to desire to input purity into their children. How do I do that? Always giving truth. Number 4, when we look at uncomfortable talks, is this.
So number 4 is knowing that approachability and grace build trust. So being approachable when it comes to the topic, which you kind of already hit on, but grace in Colossians 4:6, it says, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer each person. In our ladies' Bible study at our church I recently we were talking about salt, and Jesus saying, you are the salt of the earth, and just how much depth and how much, there was a whole, salt was so valuable back then, and you may have even heard the phrase, like, if someone was worth their salt, that salt was actually a currency. It was so valuable because it was antibacterial, it was used for preserving, and they would actually rub newborn babies down with salt to keep all bacteria away. So salt was used medicinally, it was used as currency to exchange. And so when this verse says, let your speech be always be gracious and seasoned with salt, you know that salt had so much value back then, and that it's something that preserves and protects. And so when we speak to our families, even about these tough topics, we need to remember that our speech needs to preserve our relationship. So when I talk to my kids about sexuality and shame, I remember a few years back, one of our sons got caught holding hands with a girl in the basement while they were watching a movie, and it was just like, for us, it was our first time experiencing that, and so there is a part of you as a parent that was, what are you doing? You're like, but it's not a big deal, obviously, now looking at it, but in that moment, you feel like you want to go, shame on you, why are you sneaking around? And I think, I remember in the moment feeling like the big deal here is that you were hiding. Like, if you're gonna hold hands, just tell us you like the girl, but it's really important when I think about this, let your speech be always gracious and seasoned with salt. You're gonna protect and preserve the relationship. So I don't want my kids to feel like, oh, if I like a girl, or if I am attracted to the opposite sex, it's a shameful thing, and I can't talk to mom about it because she's gonna say, shame on you. So I want my speech to always be, I want to be ready to preserve the relationship, to say, hey, let's talk about this. Why did it have to be in the basement in the dark? Like, were you feeling shame about this, or is this something that you feel like you can talk to mom about? We need to really go the extra mile to make sure we can have this conversation, and we are a safe place for you to bring your questions. And even when you do like somebody, when you have somebody you want to, have a special relationship with, and then also just rejecting our own propensity to shame one another. It is a human flesh issue to shame each other for anything, and we have to reject that because Jesus rejects that. Jesus did not come into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He wants to bring salvation, restoration, redemption. So why is it that we feel when another human in our family does something wrong, that we are there to cause them to be ashamed of themselves? But rather we should pursue the heart of Jesus, which is, how can we restore this to a healthy place?
Yeah, and when we are not approachable in it, what we're saying is get answers from somewhere else. So they're gonna Google it. They're going to ask friends, like, we have answers at our fingertips. And so do we want our children, I'll get to the next thought, but do we want them to get misguided information, or do we want them to get information from us? Because if they're getting information from us, that means they're going to ask questions to us. So the approachability thing is huge. And then grace is nothing's off limits. You can ask me any question and I'm not going to shame you. And that approach really changes the game for a lot of families. Which brings me to number 5 on the handout. And that is this, that the talk, quote unquote, is a series of conversations. It's not just one conversation. A lot of families approach it as one conversation. And I'll be honest, when we first were entering into this phase, when our oldest hit about 10, 11 years old, and I started having people that were like, hey, when are you gonna have the talk? I was thinking it's a one-time conversation. But I had a friend that honestly I'm extremely grateful to this day. This is 8 years later. I'm extremely grateful. He gave me a book. The book was called Time for the Talk. And he just gave me this book when our oldest was 10 years old, 9 years ago. And he said, hey, I just entered into this phase with my son. His son is 3 years older than my son. And he was like, I think this book will help you. And I was like, man, thank you, but I don't think we're ready for the talk. And he was like, read it. And the whole book, it's by a man that the author's name is Steve Zolas. The whole book is based upon the truth that the talk is a life of investment, not one conversation. And it really changed my mindset on it. And so when you think about this, and you think about your talk with your kids, whether they're really little right now, or you're helping raise grandkids, or your kids are older, or whatever the case may be, the talk should happen in kind of 3 phases. So the first phase, and you have this on the notes, the first phase is what's called the protection phase. That's the elementary years. The goal of this time is protection. You're going to tell them when they're a little older, probably, I mean, in our day and age, I mean, unfortunately, kids are seeing stuff early ages. We had neighborhood kids that we'd take to church, and one time we had a 5-year-old, 6-year-old that was already like, his phone started dinging, and Hannah looked over at it, and it was like basically pornographic stuff, you know. So, yeah, I mean, we've got to attack it early, but early on, you know, 4, 5, 6 years old, mommy, where do babies come from? You're not going to explain to them everything. You're going to explain to them that, well, a mommy and a daddy who are married, they come together. And, well, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you when you get older, but you need to know that a mommy and a daddy who love each other and are married, and, you know, really putting the emphasis on family. What am I doing? I'm just trying to protect them from kids at school that are like, well, I have a girlfriend and we're going to have a baby. And, you know, like, no, that's only for mommy and daddies, and, you know, stuff like that. So the goal of that time is protection. It's not to awaken curiosity. I think sometimes parents hit, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they feel like, all right, they're mature enough to handle it. They're not. But I can invest in a protection phase. Usually at this point, you know, their young minds don't need a lot of details. They just need guidance. Here's the right direction and the right way to think about it. If anybody at school ever talks to you about you know, private parts, you know, and you're going to use language like that, you need to come tell daddy, come tell mommy, we'll talk about it. And you know, you just kind of that mindset. The second phase is the connection phase. This is, you know, their preteen years, I mean, 11, and again, every family's different, but 11 to 15, 11 to 14, these are the years, you have it there on the handout. The goal of this time is to personally connect with your kids with more detailed and accurate information, to give them an open door to you and have an open door to their heart. The fact is, you need to know what they're thinking, you need to know what they're hearing, and you need to allow them to bring questions to you and realize, hey, we can talk about this at any time. Make a deal with your kids that if topics come up, and again, you have to assess your own family. There's no cookie cutter way of like, all right, address this subject at this time in this way. But you need to make a deal with them. I'm always here and I want you to talk to me. Talk to me first. Talk to me about this. During these years, recognize that during these connection years, they can't handle the truth. And so give them the truth. And when they ask questions, maybe you're not going to go into detail. You don't want to arise curiosity in a lot of it, but they're already beginning to have that curiosity. So I'm going to give them enough truth that satisfies the answer, but not enough truth that helps them go, well, I want to explore this more. And so we need to help them reverence God's creation with a mind that says God created gender and sexuality. And so because God created it, I can go to God for answers and not dating mom and dad. I'm going to go to them for some answers. And the third phase is that preparation phase. And that preparation phase is really as they get older, in the pre-marriage months and even pre-marriage years, 18, 19, 20, 21, when all their friends are probably delving into it, you're going to help them understand the goal at this time is to prepare them to know about marriage and help them, especially right before a wedding, understand how to have a healthy honeymoon and have healthy expectations. And this is a deliberate time of being involved where you're specific and open and honest. And sometimes we're like, well, that's years down the road. But like for us, we got married super young. So we're already thinking about this phase right now with our kids because they are 19, 18, and 16. And so now it's with the 16-year-old, his birthday's in a month. He doesn't know this yet, but excuse me, in a month from now, I'll take him. And I did the same thing with our oldest. We did the same thing with Lena, and I'll do it again with Micah. I'm going to take him to a different town, and him and I are going to go on a day outing. And that day's the day. Like, I'm putting dots together for him. And it's going to be just like it was for our oldest, just like it was for Lena. It's going to be like, why are we talking about this? And I'm going to tell him, like, I'm not trying to help you raise curiosity. I want you to know, because your friends are going to start talking about this stuff, and they already are. And they are. I mean, they come home from school every now and then like, hey, I heard this. So that last phase is really, I'm speaking the truth in love, and I'm helping prepare them for the next area. And so when you think about the talk being a series of conversation, the book that I read really helped me understand this. The talk is me investing into my children the characteristics that I want them to have when they're in their early 20s. I start when they're in their 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and I invest respect, humility, honesty, integrity, character. That's the talk we're talking about, because all of those things play into gender, sex, and purity. And so just kind of look at these thoughts and think, all right, where am I at on the phases, and what do I need to invest? And recognize that I'm not going to just have one conversation, I'm going to have multiple. And then that brings us to the last thought there. I don't know if you want to add anything on those. But the last thought there, number 6, is just reasons for the whole family to avoid sexual immorality.
So unfortunately, in all our years of being in ministry, sexual immorality has come up a lot in just, it just affects a lot of families. And so it's really important that we hit on it. And it's just, 1 Corinthians 6:18 says, avoid sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the person who is sexually immoral sins against his own body. I actually really like this verse because it helps you with the concept that when I sin in sexual areas, I'm sinning against myself. I'm injuring myself. And I don't think in all our 20 whatever years of ministry, I don't think I've seen anything have more far-reaching and deeply painful consequences than sexual sin. And so I know a lot of these talks have been about raising kids to understand sexuality in God's way, but also we need to know just for ourselves that if we choose to engage in sexual immorality, it is going to hurt our family deeply. And just to avoid it, like this verse says, avoid sexual immorality. And I do believe that whatever culture we create in our home is going to be in our mind of what is normal. Like we paint the picture of what is normal. And, you know, I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but the content that we fill our home with, that paints a picture for what is normal and what is acceptable. And, you know, so when it comes to deciding what kinds of movies, shows we're going to watch with our kids growing up around our family, I know there's always, you know, raising kids, there's always, well, they're allowed to watch this, they're allowed to do this, they do this. But every family is going to stand for God and answer for, what did you portray as normal in your home? What context did you make? This is normal life. This is normal relationships in your home. So when it comes to sexuality, that's been something in our home that we've chosen to, it's not that we have tried to only watch shows where it's like, oh, that doesn't exist. But it does exist. Sexual sin exists, and it happens on a lot of content, especially these days. It's more and more. Everything has sexual immorality on it. But if we decide how much of that we're going to intake in our home on a regular basis, and when we do see it, we speak out against it, and we'll say, hey, just because this awesome love scene on this movie looks like such a romantic and perfect thing, doesn't mean that it's pleasing in God's eyes or that it would cause pain in your family and in your life. Our kids need to know that. And sometimes they're like, oh, come on, like, why do you gotta preach at me for every single thing? But it really is important that we communicate to our kids. Just because this seems like a good thing doesn't mean that it is a good thing in your life. And so sometimes you just gotta be that parent that preaches to your kids and just says, this isn't in real life. Because, you talk about all the families we've worked with in our church who sexual immorality has really destroyed their family. In real life, one-night stands cause a lot of pain. In real life, pornography causes a lot of pain. And in real life, it destroys marriages. So we're not going to just sit there and intake it and all the content and pretend like it's only good. So just remembering that God does have a standard of holiness, and God does say that sexual immorality is going to be a sin against your own body.
Yeah, so when you think about this topic and addressing it, our culture, and I started with this, our culture inundates us with sex, but then also the gender issues. Well, you can do whatever you want and all of that type of stuff. Now, we're sitting in the church, we all probably understand, like, okay, we know what God says, that, it's a man and a woman that come together. But unfortunately, that is not the culture that our kids are growing up in. And I think about you guys with young kids, like, genuinely in like 10 years, and honestly, if it takes that long, it's already normalized, the homosexual relationships and all that type of stuff. It's already normalized, but
yeah, just wanted to throw out something that I'd seen from one survey just within the last year or two. Right now in America, 1 in 27 people in the current generation identify as non-binary. So if you meet 30, 15 to 30-year-olds, at least one of them is likely to not just identify as another gender, but be like, hey, I'm just whatever. I'm loosey-goosey.
yeah, so I mean that statistic alone, like, it is going to be, it's going to be crazy in the next 20 years what our culture embraces. So that alone should urge me to be proactive in this. And I think we can be proactive without being harsh toward people who believe differently than us. I am thinking about a few years ago, our kids started coming home and, from youth group, and there was one girl in particular that was in our youth group that Lena came back and she was like, hey Dad, just so you know, this girl said that she's a lesbian now and that she's bisexual and that she's this and she's that. And Dad, what do you think about all that stuff? And I think Lena was like 12 or 13. And it kind of was one of those eye-opening, like, okay, this is the culture we are now facing. And so then we just have to go into it to give biblical answers, not just clinical answers, biblical answers and honest answers, and give them a healthy way to look at it while still maintaining healthy friendships and relationships with people. Hey, culture says this, this, and this. That's a lie, but we're still going to love people. We're still going to love our friends. We're still going to encourage them. And I'm so thankful we had, Lena with that one girl. Lena started praying for her for a long time. And every now and then her name will come up. Now Lena's almost 18. She's like, I'm still praying for her. And that means a lot to me as a dad, like, to see her have a heart for somebody else to know truth. And so when it comes to just these ideas of gender, sexuality, purity, just remember, God created it. He's the creator of life. He's the creator of gender. He's the creator of marriage. He's the creator of sex. He has a lot to say into it, not only for us, but for us to learn and to pour into others. And so make it a topic in your home and in your family, whatever phase you're in, make it a topic that you address and that you are approachable on. And I believe God will use that to help build health within your family.